Hello, my name's Roisin, and November is miserable. Hello friends, and welcome to another video. November in the UK is the wettest month of the year. As you can probably hear, it is pouring with rain right now, but I thought that added the perfect atmosphere to talk about the kind of books I love to read when it's miserable outside. I don't know about you, but when the weather is grey and dark and lowering, the kind of books I like to read are books that match the pathetic fallacy of the weather, books with a little melancholy in them. I like to revel in the tragedy. Now, I don't want to go too far with the tragedy. This has to be almost a cosy tragedy, although a lot of these books do have truly traumatic things that happen in them, and so maybe would not be your preferred cosy read. But for me, there's just something about it being a wet, cold day when I can cozy up and have the catharsis of reading some books which have the potential to make me cry, or at least to revel in the feeling of melancholy. So today I'm going to talk to you about my top 10 melancholy rainy day reads, and I'd love to know in the comments what kind of books you like to read when it's raining, and maybe I can give you some recommendations, or maybe you could recommend me some melancholy reads for my next rainy day. So the first book I want to talk to you about, and the one that inspired me to do this video, is Tess of the Derbyvilles by Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy is famous for his bleak and miserable books, but he is also justly famous for his beautiful descriptions of the southwest of England and the countryside there. His pastoral, romantic imagery is absolutely stunning and pairs well with his bleak moral tales in which, although people are good, nothing good can happen. He writes stories of the structures of class and the urban-rural divide in the UK in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Tess of the Derbyvilles tells the story of Tess, the eldest girl in a very poor family in which both parents are alcoholics and spend a lot of time in the local gin house. Their name is Derbyfield, and because of this, Tess is sent to the big house locally where the Derbyvilles live, out of a mistaken idea that they might potentially be related. She gets enmeshed there with the young son of the house, and a tragedy happens. Later she moves away and falls in love with a young curate, Angel Clare, but on the night of their wedding reveals a secret which causes him to leave her, and Tess ends up in tragic circumstances and even greater poverty than that in which she grew up. Tess is about the dangerous moralism of the Victorian age, the hypocrisy and the dangers of a working-class woman in that society, where a gentleman would not face the same strictures. It is such beautiful sweeping landscapes that do go on for a while, so if you're not in it for the beauty of the prose, this one may not be for you. But if you love that sort of thing and it's a classic you have not tried, then I definitely would recommend Tess to you. Next up, if you like books that span the entire course of a person's lifetime, I would recommend Any Human Heart by William Boyd. This is a book about Logan Mountstuart, who was born on the 1st of January 1900 and lives up until the end of 1999. So his life covers the entire course of the 20th century and intersects with a lot of the history of the time. He is a writer and he encounters Hemingway in Paris and Virginia Woolf in London. He is a spy who was recruited during the Second World War by Ian Fleming, and he works as an art dealer in the 1960s. But what this is really about is the mistakes that he makes over and over again in his private life. Although he has a high-flying career and he has so many adventures, he makes mistakes over and over again with the people he loves. There is a lack of communication, and there are things that go wrong for him over and over again. If you enjoyed The Heart's Invisible Furies, I definitely think this is one for you, although it doesn't have the queer aspect, the relationships and the constant making of mistakes, and also the humour. I think would recommend this one to you if that is a book that you liked. And I loved the tragedy and the heart-wrenchingness of the story paired with the humour of the central character and the humorous take on life. Next, if you would like a heart-rending middle-grade novel, and if you like books centred around the First World War, then I would recommend Warhorse by Michael Morpurgo. Morpurgo is a writer whose books I absolutely loved as a child, and I have read so many of them, but Warhorse is definitely his most famous. I would not recommend the film, personally, because I think it has been a little bit Hollywoodized, and so doesn't quite live up to the book, but I would definitely recommend the book. Warhorse tells the story of a boy and his horse, a horse that he fell in love with at a country fair before the First World War, and he taught to plough a field, even though that was not what he was built for. This boy and this horse both end up in war and end up separated from one another. The horse witnesses the tragedy and the joys of human life. It shows the needless and violence of war, and also the true friendship that can exist between a person and an animal. It is an incredibly moving book, even though it is written for children. I think that World War I novels can often be this moving exploration of the needless tragedy of it all. And I think this one does it really, really well, despite the age range that it is for. I think that is quite a tricky task. It would be quite easy to whitewash the war, but it does not. It is definitely a tearjerker, but I would highly recommend it because I feel like the emotions presented in this book are really authentic and real, and unlike the film. Another book that may not seem that melancholy, but I definitely think has a melancholy tinge to it, is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Of course, there is one scene that happens that was spoiled for Joey and friends, which is very, very melancholy. But I think that there is a sense of loss and uncertainty that pervades the entire book. Little Women tells the story of the 4 March sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. His father has gone off to fight in the Civil War, and who come from a wealthy family who have lost a lot of their money because of the parents' beliefs. It is mentioned that their father lost money when he let a black boy come to the school that he ran. It tells the story of their growing up and the story of their experiences of life, of the constriction of being a woman, but also the big ideas and the big love that is felt in this family. There are lots of moments in it that I feel like really tug on the heartstrings and weave this book into your heart. It is one that I think is perfect for a cozy day because it has that cozy classics setting. It has a lot of love and a lot of comedy, but there is also, I feel like, a really melancholy feeling to the whole thing, and I think that can be clear from, I think that comes from Louisa May Alcott's life herself, which felt like there was a lot of loss and missing in it. Of course, there is the major losses that happen through the book, or the fights and all of those things that add to the melancholy, but even the happier moments I feel like are tinged with a certain darker look at life. I would also highly recommend both the 1994 and the 2020 film, especially at this time of year. There's something very, very Christmassy about Little Women as well. Next, a YA novel that I absolutely loved when I was a young adult myself, and that is A Gathering Light by Jennifer Donnelley, which I believe is released as A Northern Light in the US and Canada, but it was changed to A Gathering Light in the UK, so as not to be confused with Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, which was changed to The Golden Compass for the US Canada market. A Gathering Light is a piece of historical fiction which tells the story of Mattie Goki, who lives in upstate New York, I believe, in a very poor farming family who are trying to keep enough food to last the winter. Mattie, as the oldest, has to take on a lot of the responsibility, but she just wants to get out. She loves learning and she wants to go to university. She wants to leave the small town where she lives, where she feels trapped and confined. It is her experience of her relationships with her best friend, who is a black boy, and some of the other people in the town. It is set between 2 time periods, when Mattie is young and then when she is a little bit older, and she is working in a hotel because the place where she lives is in the Adirondacks, and so is a sort of tourist destination, and so she works in a hotel, and one day a young girl is found drowned in the lake. Before the girl disappeared, she gave Mattie a bundle of letters, which Mattie decides to read afterwards. So this novel is part murder mystery, trying to find out what happened to Grace, the girl who was drowned in Big Moose Lake, and also part coming of age story and about Mattie grappling with the difficulties of her life and with her wanting to get out of her world. I think the setting has that cosy but also melancholy tinge to it. It is another story with beautiful nature writing and also with characters with whom I absolutely fell in love. It is one that I haven't read for a long time, but I think I would like to revisit this year. That longing and yearning feeling to it that I think works so well in YA fiction particularly. It is so beautiful and there is so much said within such a little book that I would definitely 100% recommend it. Next one that I read recently and also has a cold melancholy feeling is The Mercies by Kiran Milwood Hargrave. I've talked about this book quite a lot because I absolutely fell in love with it, but it is set in Finnmark, an island off the north coast of Norway, where at the beginning a small fishing community lose most of the men on the island in a tragic storm. These women just try and get through the winter, but because they are women alone doing things that are meant to be done by men, and because it is the early 17th century when Norway is trying to clamp down on witches and to bring the new religion and persecuting the Sami people, they are sent a Scottish minister to look over them and to condemn any witches that he finds. It is a story of queer love. It is a story set in an isolated place with terrible, terrible weather. It is a story that feels cold and feels a sense of foreboding, because we know that someone is hunting for witches, and that witches just mean women who are capable of doing things. The story is very slow moving and very contained because there is such a small cast of characters, and it is one that feels so dark, and there is so much menace in it, and also so much sadness in it, because it is a story that surrounds loss. And of trying to make a way through this loss when the world is out to stop them from progressing. It is incredibly beautifully written, and the characters feel so vibrant and real, but at the same time it is one that I feel like is perfect for a cold, rainy day because it matches the mood of the book so well. Another one that I feel like is perfect for a day like this is a book that melds romance with science fiction. I feel like a lot of people love to cozy up with a love story on a cold, cozy day, and I think a melancholy love story, a tragic love story, is absolutely perfect. So for that, I would recommend The Time Traveller's Wife by Audrey Niffenegar. This tells the story in several different timelines. It is the story of Claire and Henry who meet. She meets him for the first time when she is 6 years old and he is nearly 40, and he meets her for the first time when he is 28 and she is 20, because he has a genetic condition that means that sometimes he is suddenly sucked out of time, and so he ended up in her early period when he was older, and so it's a very confused timeline. They're trying to understand each other when they both have parts missing, parts that they don't understand about the other one. It is so beautifully written. If you love art, the way that it describes art is so beautiful, because Audrey Niffenegar was an artist before she wrote this novel. And also the characters feel so very flawed and real. It is one that I love to come back to again and again when I'm in need of something cosy and warming. And it's one that I think explores very well the realities of love. It is also one that explores illness and being ill in a really different way, a really unexpected way. There is a lot of sadness and an inevitable sense of tragedy and impending foreboding that continues throughout this book, one that makes the love story more desperate in a way and incredibly beautiful. So I definitely would recommend it for a cosy, wet day. And another one that I would recommend for a day like this is a piece of historical fiction that I read this year, and that is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Hamlet tells the story of the death of Hamlet, the son of Shakespeare, who died when he was 11 years old. It tells the story of his life. It starts with him before he is sick, that also flashes back to when his parents, Anne Hathaway and William Shakespeare, met, and then tells the story of what happens afterwards and the way that their grief affected them. This is a story that circles around grief. It is, in a nutshell, about this death and this small part of a family, but the bigger reverberations that has. It is a very contained novel. There is not a huge amount of cast of characters, and Shakespeare's name is never mentioned because the important part of it is not that he is Shakespeare, but that he is a man who has lost his son. He is not the central character either. The mother, Anne Hathaway, who is known as Agnes in this book, is. It is one that deals really a lot with grief, and so if that's not something you feel capable of reading, then I would not recommend it, but I think that it definitely works for a day like today when you want something melancholy. It is again one with a lot of beautiful nature involved, which I think is perfect for a day like today, and it is also one that has profound, deep characters. Although there were parts of it I didn't love, I definitely think it is a perfect cozy book. Next, possibly the most tragic and sad book that I'm going to talk about. So if you're in the mood for something that is not just weepy but profoundly tragic, then I would recommend Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Thein. This begins in Canada in 1991 when 10-year-old Marie and her mother invite a guest into their house, a young woman who has fled China in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square protests. Over the course of her staying with this family, Ming tells them the story of her family in revolutionary China, from the Shanghai conservatories of the 1960s through to the events leading up to the demonstrations in Beijing in 1989. It contains a beautiful love story that endures through the tragedy of the Cultural Revolution, and it also involves two people, an uncle and niece, who are musicians, a composer, violinist and a pianist, and their love of music and their relationship and how it endures through this difficult terrible time in a country's history. This is an incredibly beautiful, slow-moving, melancholy book where tragedy feels like it is always around the corner, but it's also about family, relationships and love, and also art and science, and the passions that people have. The skill of the writing is probably the best out of all of these books, and I absolutely adore it, and I think that it is one that is perfect for a day like today. And then finally, just a short little children's picture book that I think absolutely is a perfect thing for a day like today. It is a book of love, a book of kindness, a book of caring, and a book that always makes me cry, and that is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. This is the story of a boy and a tree who love one another and play together, but as the boy grows up, he moves on with his life and the tree stays where she is. She keeps coming back and asking for more from the tree, and she gives him everything that she can until in the end they end up back together again. It is so moving and so powerful, and I absolutely adore the illustrations and the writing, and if you've never read The Giving Tree before, I 100% recommend that you give it a go. It's one that doesn't take too long to read because it is only a children's picture book, but one that definitely will stay with you for a long, long time. That is my 10 melancholy books for rainy days that I wanted to recommend to you. Please, again, leave in the comments any melancholy books that you love or any genres that you particularly love for cosy, rainy, nothingy Sundays. I would love to hear from you and maybe recommend you some books in those genres. If you like this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up to show your support and to subscribe, because I put out new videos every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday, and so I will be here to see you again soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!